There we
it
go.
Got it. There it is.
All right, we are
All right.
live.
Thank you all so much for coming in this holiday season and during this time. I appreciate you being here. We're excited about our show today. So let me just say welcome. We're going to get right to it. But I want to just open with a quick prayer. And then we'll move forward and I'll let you know what we're doing. So if we just could take in a deep breath of God, breathing out and bringing us into this space right now. Blessing this time together, grateful for this time together. We come with like minds, we've come to learn, to share, to be together. And we know that whatever it is, whatever needs to be said, whatever needs to be heard, whatever needs to be done is known by us all. And we are here willing and able to do what is ours to do. And so we just give thanks for this time together, and we bless this time and call it good and very good. And so it is. All right. All right. So today is going to be just we're going to do some highlights of our year last year. And so, of course, we had some wonderful, great speakers. We couldn't put them all on, but we just wanted to get some nice little pieces of what they said throughout the year, which we felt was really great. So I'm not going to talk any further. I'm going to go ahead and just, Robert, whoever's going to put it on, just go ahead and start playing the recording. And if you have any questions or thoughts, just put them in the chat and we'll try to get to those at the end. Thank you again so much for being here.
Sign me up, like, oh yeah, I'm all in. And then the drum started, this primordial African drum started, this Sabamfu, our teacher, started just on this drum. And I ran like a sprinter to the altar and got down on my hands and knees with my head on the floor and bawled my ever-loving guts out. And I don't know what for.
Okay.
I don't know what for. I couldn't identify anything that I was grieving or had grieved to those depths. And there it was. So for me, it's not a matter of if, just when. And I'm much more purposeful now to do it on purpose and to do clear purification processes that is willing to take the lid off of this and look at what's there and the shards of this. And if our teachings are true, then anything that's unresolved, unhealed, unattended to is a magnet to attract to itself that. So it actually grows. So we've got a lot of hopefully indicators and hopefully some inspiration to say that I'm going to continue to look at this and to tell the truth about what I'm seeing, and then to take out a root system that is not something I want to be growing, and to put another root system down, new thoughts, new teachings, new ideas.
Thank you so much. You as you're talking, you said you are much more purposeful now. Talk to us about that. What does that mean? You're much more purposeful about defining it, finding it. What are you much more purposeful about, and how are you purposeful?
Well, being authentic about it, telling the truth. I'm also with people that I trust and I believe have some trust with me, being able to say, I want to take a look at this with you if you're open to, or I know the pain of denial, and if you want to look at that, I'm open to that. I'm not as quick to do that anymore because I'm devoted not to take people's hope from them. And there's some aspect of me that's hell-bent on taking people's hope from them. And by that, I mean false hope. This delusions that we're not going to have pain or suffering or losses or something, that we're going to be here in this human experience and bypass all of this. I also am purposeful to look to see at what caused the upsets in me before they get so extreme. So I'm quicker to attend to it instead of suppressing it, depressing it, and disowning it. I'm also more called then to go back to the basics of some of the teaching, our teachings, and what is based on these how to do church experts. Many of us here are involved in churches, not everybody, but even if you're not, this I think applies to our families, to our relationships, significant relationships, workplaces, or ministries. That back to the basics on these things, meaning the ones that are going to have the stamina and the resilience to be able to see this through and to fulfill this calling that we have, calls us to operate in the basics of this, which is back to our teachings, the importance of prayer, the importance of mind treatment, and not just talking about prayer and talking about treatment, but actually in practice of that. And that we then extend that to others. You know, so many people say New Thought is the best kept secret. And it's like, if New Thought, that's not something to be proud of. It's like we have allergies. I have an allergy to it. I still do, even after all these decades of the notions of evangelism. Instead of like, it's time to do some evangelism. It's time to say, this is what works for me. This is my teaching as I understand it, and I want to offer this out to the world. So one of my primary mission is to serve those who serve, and to get empowered teachings to the whole of the planet. So not to be so kind of afraid or worried about offering these teachings out because I'll be seen as an evangelist or, some snake oil salesman or something. It's like they can't have a thought about me I've not already had about me. It also means, I think, PJ, dealing with this and the consequences of this, or the toxicity of this suppression, depression, denial, and to deal with that more quickly, to not let that go as far. And I've never met anybody that said, "Oh, I'm glad I put that off all those decades." It's like, well, no, I wish I'd have dealt with that a little sooner. I wish I'd have felt a little more equipped to deal with that. So we have a way then to offer this out to people. It's also, I'm much more mindful about knowing that this is developing a stamina in me, a grit in me, a resilience in me, and that I'm going to have to cultivate and have if I am going to serve the mission that I believe I have here on the earth, that I cannot do it without grit and resilience and tenacity. So I'm mindful then to be tending to that, and to keep joy alive, that even in the losses and even in the heartbreaks and the decline and the closures and whatever else is happening, the losses, that there is an element of joy that is tended to. I'm very conscious to keep levity in what I do and to stay as playful as I can. When I have a very thick wiring for seriousness and uptightness and getting it done. It's also that is also anxious. Anxiety is a symptom. It's a symptom. So seriousness is a symptom of anxiety. So I'm mindful when I start to get too serious that I've got to back it on up and bring some levity to this and get a hint of playfulness going here. And I know that I've got to, for me, that there's no formula for this, and that whatever works for me may not necessarily work for others, and to continue to broaden my approaches and to broaden my own bandwidth for my own humanity. And therefore, I have a better capacity to serve the very broad bandwidth of humanity.
Gotcha.
And through my own journey to inner peace, I want peace for the planet. And I am called what they term a subtle activist. I don't go out with placards and I don't demonstrate in front of buildings and, and do things like that. But with my consciousness, my peace consciousness, I am working to bring peace to the planet. By bringing together 8,945 people for peace, I am working towards global peace. And so that's where the number and the name came from. It was staggering to me that you need so few people to shift consciousness.
It is staggering.
That's 9,000 people 9,000. And that just blew my mind that that is possible. And that if we are radiating peace, and there is, according to the peace study, some of you may be familiar with from the 80s, 70s, and 80s, there is a process for radiating peace. But one of the downfalls was that, when people stopped meditating about peace around a certain area of the world, then the crime rates and the conflict went back up. And so I thought, well, what if we were radiating peace more often? What if we were living peace, and peace came from being something that is this abstract to being very practical, and we are living that, and we are healing ourselves, and I believe in the process healing the world, then magic can happen. And so I take this consciousness thing very seriously. We talk about it all the time, we read about it. And I thought, again, let's test this principle. If consciousness really has an effect on the world, then having 9,000 plus 90,000 people, however many, no matter what the number is, if we are all radiating peace, then consciousness has to shift. It has to shift. And the studies, as they continue, are continuing to show that it makes a difference. Your individual consciousness makes a difference. And so as I healed myself and the wounds and the baggage I had from my own family of origin, as I started to gain more peace, more inner peace, I wanted that for the world. I wanted it for other people. And shifting my own consciousness is how it worked for me. And so my programs are about shifting consciousness, doing the work we need to do to heal ourselves at a very deep level so that we are more peaceful every moment of every day, not just when we're sitting and meditating.
So thank you. That is just, the number is just staggering. It's hard to believe that just that small amount of people, and there's so many people that want peace, but your whole idea of what's the practicality from moving it from abstract, let's be peaceful, to actually how do we do it? So that would simply be the next question. You said that there is a process for radiating peace. Can you share with us what that means and what the process is that you're talking about?
So for me, it really was about bringing peace from the abstract to the practical. So that meant in my meditation time and meditating daily and really taking seriously this call to meditate daily and to find a place within that meditation where I feel peaceful within my heart, my mind, my body, my spirit. So that means now I am taking care of myself on a much different level than I ever have before. And so a peaceful body for me is about, do I feel good physically, this physical body of mine, the vessel that my spirit is encapsulated by? And is my environment peaceful? Do I love being at home? Am I peaceful in my environment? Am I peaceful in my relationship? When I took on this initiative, it's interesting when you take things on, suddenly you start to get all these, you're inspired to the kind of work you need to do every single day. And so I started to hear how I would respond to my husband when he would say something. And there are things that automatically would irritate me. And I would think, why the heck am I irritated? Like, what is that? And I know that in my response, I'm not feeling peaceful and I'm not radiating peace to him. Right. And nothing he was saying to me was intimidating or negative or toxic. In fact, and this comes from my family of origin, he was simply asking me, how are you doing? And I would think, why are you asking me that? What, I look like I'm not doing well? And I just kind of like spiraled down from a simple question. And then it made me step back and realize that was coming from somewhere. That came from watching my parents with each other. They had a very unhappy marriage. They never divorced. They stayed together. My siblings and I, at some point, had a conversation, so we wished they had, divorced.
So the book is about forgiveness, but there's a couple of really critical practices, and I've been trying to break them out. Like for right now, the month of February in my community, we are doing a month-long judge-free program.
Nice.
Because one of the things that we often don't realize is that our judgment is an indication to the forgiveness work you're going to have to do.
Okay.
Because when we don't question our judging, we're not paying attention to the way we set someone up to be against us. And so often we're inviting unkind interactions, and then we have to practice forgiveness. But if we practice judgment and we learn to watch our minds and watch how our minds create stories, and then how our minds create stories that we get attached to and we get righteous about. And all of that activity starts with me looking at someone or something or a situation or politics or measuring the news and finding fault and blame and criticism and judging. And all of that is where I get set up to then have all this emotional reaction, where if I'm practicing non-judgment, it doesn't mean I won't judge. We all judge. We all judge all the time. But I won't judge my judging. And I'll be basically learning to understand the activity of my mind.
Got it.
See, we want to learn to watch the activity of our minds. And so in the course, in the book, but in the course that I teach also, is one of the first things I do is I have students start from the day they sign up, practicing non-judgment.
Very good.
Because it teaches us the activity of our minds. The other thing is learning to practice radical self-honesty. Radical. I do private coaching. So when I coach, I'm always giving my clients permission to not be nice. Right? Because especially if you take on a coach that's spiritual in nature, you want to have your best face. You want to put your best foot forward. You want to get their approval. And so I try to squash that as quickly as I can, not because I don't really want them to be nice in the world, but because in order to know what's in the way of me embracing the fullness of my life, I need to know what I'm pondering. And so if I'm working with a client, I'll say to them, just say what is. Just tell me what you're feeling without reservation. Just take off all the judgments and the restrictions, so then we know what we're dealing with. So, and practicing radical self-honesty is about also being able to really to be honest about what we're feeling in any given moment, and to use that as fodder. I just did on our podcast, I have a live podcast that I'm doing now. And on the podcast yesterday, it was about the pearl of the oyster, or one of those. I can't remember the name of it. But we talked about the pearl, the way that pearl exists is because it was initially an irritant.
Right.
And so if I embrace, lean into, and wrap my loving, compassionate arms around that irritant, which could be anyone here in the way you live inside of me, I'm going to grow and shine instead of running from. So radical self-responsibility. The other thing is, or radical self-honesty, but the other one is, and this is another big one, my spiritual teacher, and I distinguish her from my science of mind teacher. I had a brilliant, lovely science of mind teacher, but I learned different things. And so from my early teacher, what she invited us to look at was embracing, hear me out, folks, 100% responsibility for my life.
Yes.
And that scares the bejesus out of a lot of people.
Out of all of
it's
us.
a scary idea.
To step into. So what does it take? What does it take to be fearlessly courageous?
Hmm.
Yes, I know. I,
It's funny because I don't, I, I did say it. Uh, um, do I think of myself as fearlessly courageous? I kind of do, and here's why. It's not an egoic thing. It's not because I think I'm all that. It's because I know I'm all that, and
mm,
it's not on the relative plane. It's on the absolute plane. When I really get in touch with who I am, and I understand that, as Emerson would say, the oversoul that guides everything is who I am. When I really get that, then it's not hard to be fearlessly courageous. I, I'm unwilling, and many of you know this, I'm unwilling anymore to pretend or to soft pedal or to dilute the truth of what's going on. I'm just not. So, the people that have a hard time with me when I say I am God, or I go into that understanding of God, I'm unapologetic with that particular understanding of what God is, because it's me, it's you, it's all of us. And the more people that get in touch with their true divine power, the less people will wander around feeling weak, living in a world of lack, being
mm,
unhappy. And I'm all about what Thomas Troward said. Thomas Troward said, our only purpose in life is to enjoy it. So I am all about enjoying life, and I'm not going to enjoy life as a second-class citizen. I'm only going to enjoy life understanding that I am the center of the creative power, and I get to use it in my life. And so, I'm so certain of that, so sure of that. I am
mm,
so embedded in that. It just does not serve me to play small anymore.
yeah,
Not that I
yeah.
ever thought I played small, to be honest. But when I look back, people go, oh my God, you've starred on Broadway, you've starred in movies, you've done all these things. What a life. And I'm like, you know what? The entire time I was doing all of that, I was suffering from a very bad case of the imposter syndrome. And
Mm,
so while my
yes.
my outward my outward projection was fabulous, leading man, successful, all of that, great, great romantic life. Um, Inside, there was a great part of me that was like, someone's going to figure this out. Someone's going to figure this out, that I'm not all that. And it wasn't until I realized, oh, wait a minute, you are all that. And you're so much more. And now I don't really have too much imposter syndrome left. I don't even know if there's anything left.
Good. Thank you so much. So, I completely agree. Not that I have to for it to be true, but I do. And I just that absolute knowing. I think talking about when you're showing up as yourself. You talked about, and I think this leads into this next thing that I want to share with, or I want to ask you about, when we talked prior to, when you talked about never shying away from your story. I think that's a part
Mm,
of this, showing up completely as who you are. So talk to us a little bit about that. Well, how the importance of your story and why we shouldn't shy away from it.
well, here's what I teach when I teach ministers. We all have stories.
Yeah.
I suggest that ministers do not share their story unless they have a point of view about it, and that point of view should be inspiring, not catastrophic. So we've all seen the ministers that show up on stage to work their crap out in front of the congregation. And frankly, I don't go to be inspired and want to watch somebody work their stuff out. But if they have a point of view about the stuff that they have worked out, and that's the story we have. And not to catapult quickly into this, but 4 years ago, my story was that my daughter was in a very horrible car accident and was on life support for 5 days. And it happened on a Sunday, the Sunday after Thanksgiving, and I was at home when I got the phone call, rushed to the hospital, and then was there for 5 days. And that was my story at the time. Did I have a point of view about it? Yeah, I had one point of view, keeping her alive. That was my only point of view. And I did not talk to many people. My husband and I we had a congregation that rallied around us, that kept us safe, kept us from having to deal with anyone outside of what was going on in that ICU unit. And then something happened. Well, on the 5th day, we released her. And then someone wrote on Facebook, and I think I shared this with you all at the conference. Somebody wrote on Facebook, I guess you're going to have to think twice now when you say life is unfolding perfectly. And I wasn't angry at that person. You know, here's the other thing. Because of this teaching and because of what I know, I've never had a moment of anger against the girl that drove that car. And she was intoxicated. And she was driving 90 miles an hour in a residential area, joyriding. I have never had 1 second of anger against an 18-year-old girl who in that moment of her life made a bad decision. So, and I wasn't angry at this person. I thought, But what did get to me and what did flare up in me was, you need to get right back up on your pulpit this Sunday. Pulpit. I never used the word pulpit. I don't know where that came from. I need to get back up on that stage on Sunday, just like you were last Sunday when Nora was standing with you, singing through the whole service with you. Get back up on that stage and answer the person that wrote that Facebook. And then, James, you can do whatever you want after that. If you want to disappear for 6 months, disappear. We'd get up on that stage. And I did.
Right? So,
Yes.
you know, for me, I am of a certain age that I would rather do it easy than have to make it hard.
Absolutely. One of my favorite titles from, I think it was Marilyn Day Hall that said it, could have been someone else, but anyway, she said, let it be easy. That was her, just let it be easy. And I try to do that with everything, but this visioning process is something that escapes me. I guess I've never gone through it, so I'm going to ask you about that in a minute.
Okay,
I'll ask
I've
you to
never
put-
heard that, like people troubled by it. So I want to find out what your issue is.
Yeah, well, I think it's probably because this whole spiritual aspect, because the visioning process that I've known is a corporate visioning process.
Oh,
It's
no.
not necessarily, yes, exactly. So it's got to be different. What you're talking about is absolutely different than what I'm used to doing. So I really want to talk with you about that. And so right now we can maybe talk a little bit about there's a couple of things that you just said. Is there a difference, or is it a different level of it? What's the difference between meditation and visioning?
Well, visioning has a meditative aspect to it, but
Okay.
you know, depending on what kind of meditation you do, some people want to shut out thoughts. This is kind of inviting in filtered thinking, so to speak. And it's like, what is God's highest idea? What is the divine idea that is seeking to come forth, as opposed to everybody throwing your ideas and we're going to brainstorm about what's best.
Right.
That's the corporate model.
Yes, it is.
And if people are just throwing stuff up against a wall to see what sticks, that's exerting a whole lot of energy. But if you're allowing something to come through in the visioning process, then you're both meditating and receiving information, not just energy, but information that is the essence of who you are, your individualized expression. So you may get a certain vision, Pjae, and I may get a different vision. And if we are visioning together, there's a place for us to meet that supports the highest and best for all concerned.
Okay.
So stop playing with those people and vision with me.
Oh, I will. I'll be definitely kind of loving what you're saying, and it makes sense to me. So can you just take us through the process a little bit? How many steps are there? Are there steps? Because again, that's another corporate way to, what's the steps? What's the process? But how exactly would you even?
There's a process. There's a formal process, and then I always improvise off of the formal process. Okay. So the key question is, what is the highest and best idea? What is God's highest and best idea for this project, for this event, for this ministry, for this relationship, for my finances, for whatever it is that you're visioning about? Call forth the highest and best vision. Okay. And then as you're getting that information, and just accept everything that comes. Because the worst thing, I say, the only way that you can mess up envisioning is to think that you're not doing it right, right?
Yes.
Because there's no mistakes. And so, you know, when you're allowing that to come through, then you can get specific. What does it look like, right? You may start to get images, and then you don't negate any of the images that come through. Oh, that's ridiculous. I can't see a purple cow. I mean, whatever it is that comes through, you have to be open and receptive to it, right? What does it feel like? So you're aligning vibrationally with the energy of what it is that is seeking to emerge, the highest and best is seeking to emerge, right? You know,
Right.
and you can ask, are there any other senses that are activated? What does it smell like? What does it taste like? You know, what does it sound like? So allow yourself to be immersed in this divine idea that is seeking to be, right? And so part of that beingness is that I am a component. And so I have to ask the question, what must I release in order for this vision to be realized? And so saying, what must I release? I've got to look at different stuff. You know, I've got to look at, you know, any thoughts about lack. I've got to look at any thoughts about control. I've got to think about whatever it is, because when it's a private meeting with you and your source, nobody else gets to input or judge about who you are, but you get to be in that space with spirit where you're authentically open and listening to what needs to go.
It's been an amazing ride, this whole journey with E Squared. I've just gotten to, I always knew these principles were true. I mean, that's why I wrote about them. But since this book came out, I have gotten probably 1 million letters from people.
Really?
And just with these stories, it's just amazing. Like, and they usually start with, oh my gosh, you're never going to believe this. I mean, I hear this over and over and over again. And they send me these stories of, you know, how they realize that there is this force out there that has their back. And people are just, you know, blown away with the results that they get. So that's been really wonderful for me to have met so many people. I've been able to, you know, travel all over the world. I've spoken about my book in the Philippines, in Finland, in Peru. I mean, I've gone all over the world speaking about this book, and it just really hit a chord. It went, I don't know, 40 languages have been translated into, and it just, you know, took off in an amazing way. So anyway, thank you, Dude. Thank you, God. Thank you, FP. And thank you all.
I like that at the beginning where you your very first experience mentions about the Dude of Eyes, which is, what is that, from the Big Lebowski or something?
Right.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. So tell us a little bit about how did you begin to go down that path? How did you pick the experience that you chose, and, you know, why did you go down that particular path? What got you there?
Well, I feel like, you know, the stuff that all you ministers tell us about, this is important information. We need to know this, you know. And so I guess in some ways it was kind of a con into getting people to try this, you know. It's one thing to read about this or to hear about it, but let's try this out in your own life. So I came up with these experiments and set it up kind of like, you know, with the lab report sheets. And that way people are going to really try this. You know, is there really this force that has your back? Is that true? And, you know, you give it time, you know, 48 hours. I kind of decided to make it quick, but, you know, the evidence that comes back for people. So it just, you know, solidifies these truths that we've known about for a long time. I mean, ever since Jesus said, seek and ye shall find, ask and ye shall receive. So this is a way of just testing it out. So, I mean, like the Dude of Eyes, and I try to use kind of funny titles. One of the things I feel really important is we need to make it lighter. You know, like, we're all about seeing the light, right? I mean, that's the light of the world, this beautiful light of the world. And I think we also need to be light. We need to be light in every way. So I made them kind of funny, and I, you know, kind of poked fun at maybe some of the real rigid stuff that happens. I mean, once we think we know something, we no longer are open, right, to what could be. So I think it's so important to stay open. And I think when you're kind of laughing or kind of, you know, not taking it so serious, you leave more doors for spirit to get through.
Absolutely.
So I think, that's kind of why I have the sort of humorous titles for these experiments. But it's a very important subject, but it's just kind of fun to take it lighter and not to, be so ponderous about it.
Absolutely. I know that, when you first start on this path, and it's been a while, so it's kind of hard to get first mind. And some of these experiments helped me to go back and remember what I actually know for sure. And as I'm talking to people, and how do you know this, or how do you know for sure? I get that question all the time. How do you recognize the voice of God? How do you know that that's not just your ego talking, or any number of things? And just to be able to have some kind of actual experiments. So listen, just try it. Just sit and ask this question and see what happens, and see what you hear, see what you see. These are fabulous experiments. So I just really appreciate that you put it in this form that anyone can go and take a look at, and just prove to themselves. So they don't have to listen and just take our word for it. So I really
Exactly. Yeah.
Don't take our word for it. No one ever does. But just to have it in such a way that people can just look at this and say, okay, well, here's one experiment. I'll just try it myself and just start believing. One of the ones you did, and I don't even remember if that was what it came out to be, but I remember thinking that it's more about what you focus on, what you focus on grows. And I can't remember what you asked, but what I know for sure is how when you buy a car, and you've never seen the car before, and now all of a sudden you bought the car, and now everybody's got one. And that just hasn't changed at all. So that's kind of one of those things where what you focus on grows. It's like it's already been there, but you've never noticed it, and you're bringing it back into your focus, into your purview. So those are some wonderful experiments that you talked about. So I'm going to go through a couple of the experiments, if you don't mind, unless you have something you want to share, or anybody has a question.
No.
I'm just going to kind of go through some of them. So the first experiment, you talked about devoting this 48 hours to evidence of knowing this is an all-knowing, all-perfect field of potential. I think that's what you mean by the FP.
Right. Field of infinite potentiality.
Yeah, field of potentiality. So you said ask for an unexpected gift. Talk to me about that.
Well, I feel like this, whatever we want to call it, we can call it God, I guess, because we're with reverends, right? But okay, so I believe it is constantly wanting to guide us, constantly wanting to bless us, constantly wanting to interact with us, constantly. So it's not even a stretch to say, okay, give it 48 hours. The thing you have to do is be open enough. And so I think if you're giving it 48 hours, I say don't have any expectations, just let it go. Just open your mind and rid yourself of all thoughts that may deceive, as the Course in Miracles says. Just turn it off. There's no skin off your knuckles if it doesn't work. So yeah, I think, and that's where the Course says, okay, fine, they're paying attention now, so I'm going to give them a gift. And the kind of gifts that people got are just amazing. I mean, I think the truth of it is we're getting gifts constantly. I mean, the sun came up this morning. I mean, the beautiful flowers in our backyard, but it's making us pay attention to this beauty that's always there. And I think sometimes we get so focused. I always talk about possibility state or problem state. And we get so focused on the problems, and we put all of our attention on what's going wrong. And there's always a little bit of something that could be improved. But when you start putting your attention on it, it grows. I mean, that problem, that issue gets bigger. And so I just think it's so important right now that we really put our attention on all the beauty in the world that is still there. It is.
To help families heal and learn. His motto, and I love this, Brock, his motto is love, compassion, tolerance, and forgiveness, leading to understanding. So his topic today is diversity and new thought principles. So I'm going to go ahead and not talk more about that and let you talk on into that, but that is a fabulous topic. And I love the fact that you have looked at it as a gateway to have some difficult conversations with the LGBTQIA plus community. So go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and let you start and share your thoughts and however you want to go. I've got some questions for you should you not answer all the questions that are on my mind, if we have time to get to it.
Well, I'll try to answer everything that you ask. I'm very honored to be here. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. And PJ and Bill, thank you so much for asking me. It's a delight to be here, and I love each and every one of you. But talking about some of the things that I hope that we talk about today is the diversity that you brought up, and then my ministry and how it sort of got started, and what I'm doing out there in the world of the unhoused is just as equally as important to me as the diversity that I'm doing. But my ministry's purpose is called Brought Forward Life Ministry, and the purpose is to be a support to the disenfranchised and the struggling and the hurting, and people who wouldn't necessarily actually step into a church. Right. And to help families heal and learn alternative ways, which you said that for me, thank you, of being together when they believe that there's some kind of differences. You know, LGBT is different for some people in their families, or growing up in the South in Memphis, being different was a white person married a black person, or a Hispanic person, things of that nature. Differences came around. So my passion is to help people learn alternative ways of being together, and that the ethical and spiritual aspects of New Thought is my way of teaching them how to do it. And that when we look to ethical principles and spiritual principles, we can see that we are all one with God. And when we talk about that, when I talk about that in my counseling or in my workshops and seminars, you see people's eyes sort of light up. It's like, they've never heard that they're one with God, and that everyone is a part of this humanity here. So that's what I strive to do, and that's what I've been doing. And I developed some workshops because I was actually guest speaking at Unity of Vacaville, just up the road, and they have some LGBTQ youth in their congregation. And Reverend Dahlia came to me and she said, help me, because I'm going to have people leave if we don't support them with the program. So that's what started this, actually. And of course, it really started many years ago, which we'll get into, but that's how this came about.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So just talk to me about, you say that you get together and you talk with them about alternative ways of being together. Talk to us about what that looks like. What does that mean?
Well, the most important thing I'm thinking that I try to do when I go into coaching a family in person or on Zoom sometimes is that, first of all, we're setting a safe space here. Everyone has respect for the others. And I talk about seeking to understand, asking questions. You know, when I was younger and I came out, no one asked me any questions.
Okay. No
one asked me, what's this about? Or how did this happen? Or we don't understand, tell us more. And so I don't want to get into that story at this moment, but when that happened, it became a way for me to help others understand how that they can navigate this path of and building a bridge, so to speak, to their families. So how do we sit down? Mom and dad are upset. My child is different, they're calling it. And whatever that difference is, how can we have a conversation built on love, you know, around respect? And then what I do is I say, what are the questions that you're seeking to understand about your child or your loved one, things of that nature? And I bring in spiritual and ethical principles, because spiritual living and ethical living to me is like parent and child. They're linked, they're connected. And so spiritual living is actually a deeply personal search for the expression of God, and it speaks to us internally in our heart and in our head and in our soul. And then ethical living is the external expression of spiritual awareness, and it's how we project ourselves out into the world. Okay. So when people hear that for the first time, or maybe to be reminded, they go, wow, you know, and what can we do with our hands and our feet, and how are we behaving and acting in the world? And so, and then some people say, you know, well, I'm not spiritual and I'm not ethical either. So then how do we come to a point of, how do we have this conversation with the family to help you understand? So that's where we start. And, you know, and a lot of times, y'all, parents are confused. They don't know what's going on. They weren't necessarily brought up in that world. And, you know, some of them think it's a sin, and that's where all this stuff comes from. And then some of them think that it's against the law, and they have fear for their kids growing up that way. And so that's the diversity part of my ministry and how I go about it.
And my mom, you know, one of her famous sayings was, well, I guess I don't get the Mother of the Year award. And she did not. She did not. She never got the Mother of the Year award. My mother adopted 4 children, 2 as infants, my brother and me, and adopted my 2 sisters later on when one of them was 2 and one of them was 8. 2-year-old had suffered from quite a bit of physical and emotional neglect, and the 8-year-old had actually been abused physically and sexually. And so it was a big change to our family. I was 6, my brother was 8 at the time. But my mom was always a compassionate person. And I remember early on when I was just so confused by what was suddenly going on in our household, saying, you know, she tells lies all the time and she takes my stuff and she breaks it. And what does this word mean? As I'm like, words I had never been exposed to, I'm asking, what is mother? And my mom, you know, just took it all in stride, fundamentalist Christian that she was, and said, she was, I think, kind of the start of my compassionate path, in that from a very young age, she encouraged me to look at things from another person's point of view. And she said, you know, you've been so lucky, and think about, she hasn't had that. She didn't have anybody to teach her not to lie. So she has to learn not to lie. She didn't have anybody to teach her all these things. And I internalized that in some good ways and some not so good ways. I learned from an early age to put myself always on the back burner and to forgive often before I even allowed myself to be angry in the first place. And so you know, the gifts are always loaded, as you said, those mothers' gifts, and yet I would not trade being a compassionate person. She raised me to be a person of compassion. And I appreciate that. And I can see the gifts of the Divine Mother through all of that, you know, that there is this intuitive sense, this ability to listen, to notice, to not make up your mind before taking the time to allow information, and not just head information, but to allow heart information to inform us before we take action, before we speak, before we respond or react. And I really give my mother, I give her a lot of credit for that, for raising me to be a compassionate person. I was adopted, as I mentioned before, too. And although I was an infant, the adoption agency where I was adopted from said that for this first 6 weeks of my life, I did nothing but cry, and no one could comfort me. And yet, and my parents tell the story of going to the adoption agency and them talking about a baby that cried all the time, and then going, but we didn't know that was the one they were going to give us. And I'm still crying today. As you know, I'm an emotional person. I'll cry at the drop of a hat, unapologetically. But, you know, I've also come to really, really honor my birth mother as someone who had no idea, you know, what she was dropping me into, but who felt that I would have a better chance at a good life than what she could give me. And those have always been my feelings for my birth mother. I've never had a moment of consciously feeling that I was abandoned. I've always felt like it was an extraordinarily loving decision, even more so on the day that my daughter was born. Because I remember she actually had some health problems when she was first born. And so they, instead of, doing the birth plan and putting her on my chest and letting me bond with her, they put her in a machine and flew her in a helicopter to a hospital, to a children's hospital. And I remember thinking how intolerable it was that I didn't get to be with her that day, and weeping and having so much compassion for my birth mother, because the same thing happened to her, only the baby never came back. And so I've always had a great deal of honor for her. And I think about, Divine Mother, this idea of us in our human form being given all these gifts and challenges and the power of choice, and walking through the world making choices that aren't always in alignment with the goddess, with Divine Mother, with Mother Earth, with all of that mother energy that we honor when we think to honor it, but which we sort of naturally dishonor as we just go stomping through life, not necessarily paying attention. And so one of the gifts of Divine Mother to me is just that attention, learning to pay attention to what's going on.
Through the visible into the invisible.
Nice.
And for me, that's what this work is doing. It is walking. I'm going to change Ernest a little bit and say science and spirituality. Science and spirituality are being married here. Okay, so what the scientific research is showing us that only 20% of our mental change, which is permanent change in behavior and attitudes and the way we think, only 20% of that comes from insights. How many times have you gone to a conference, taken a class, read a book, heard a sermon, and you're like, oh my God, that was amazing. You had a big insight about something. But then 2 weeks later, you're like, what was that? Right? What happened there? What did I learn?
Yeah.
Some of it sticks, yes. But according to this research, 20% of our permanent changes come from insight.
Right.
80% come from something else. And that something else is the system that I'm going to teach you today. How do you like that? It's called mental fitness.
Okay.
Mental fitness.
All right.
And here's a definition of mental fitness. Mental fitness is our capacity to respond to life's challenges with a positive rather than a negative mindset. Sounds kind of new thoughty, doesn't it?
It does.
Mental fitness is our ability to respond to life's challenges with a positive rather than a negative mindset. And of course, when we do that, we can thrive regardless of what's happening in our lives. We can experience peace of mind and happiness and joy and contentment. We can create healthier relationships, and we can pretty much achieve our heart's desires.
Yeah.
So, anybody want a piece of that? Are we good? Yay, 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 yay. Okay, so I want to give you a few basics. I'm going to lay a little bit of groundwork before I get into the meat and potatoes, or depending on your food preferences, your tofu and potatoes of the work. Right? I did that for you, Lisa, right? And John Carn, if he's on this call, but I don't know that he is. So I'm going to lay a little bit of what I'm going to call scientific foundation. I don't have a scientific brain, so I have to make this very simple so I can understand it and explain it. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to explain it. So this research has used a scientific process called factor analysis. And in layperson's terms, factor analysis means going down to the root cause of whatever the situation is. What's the fundamental cause of what's happening? So as an example, factor analysis if you look at colors, thousands of colors, using factor analysis, you would find that there are 3 colors at the root of all colors: red, blue, and green. They sit at the base of all colors. Factor analysis took it down to that level. If you use factor analysis on issues with a business, it's factored down to 3 potential problems: the problem with people, the problem with processes, or a problem with leadership. Factor analysis says that's the base of any issue that you're having in your company. Okay?
Repeat the 3 again. Repeat the 3 again.
People, processes, or leadership.
Thank you.
Just as an example of what factor analysis does. So they've done factor analysis on what causes us to not respond well to life's challenges, to have angst and upset and stress and worry and frustration and sadness and irritation and guilt and shame and all that, versus peace and harmony and creativity and joy and connection and kindness. What they did, this research, factor analysis, to say what is at the root. Okay?
Yeah.
So far with me?
Yeah, good.
Okay, cool. So the factor analysis showed, and I'm going to give you these numbers, and then we're going to dig into these numbers: 10, 5, and 3. 10, 5, and 3. I'm going to say what those are, and then we'll really dig into the guts of this. 10, mental saboteurs. Keyword, saboteurs. Saboteurs are found in the limbic system, or the brain stem, left side of the brain. This is physiology here. This is brain science. Do we have any actual brain scientists on the call? No? Good. I'm glad. Good. I'm really glad about that. So, but that's where this lives. And that, you know, you guys, we all know the survival brain, right? The fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. This is primal side of our brain. But it's where our saboteurs, 10 saboteurs, live. And they speak to us in the emotional language of all these things I've said before: fear, anxiety, doubt, frustration, insecurity, guilt, blame, worry. That's what that side of the brain does. Okay, so that's the 10. I'll dig into the 10 in a minute. I want to give you the overview first. So that's the 10. So there's 10, 5, and 3. So that's 10. 5 is the other side of the brain, over on the right side, which is the middle prefrontal cortex. Got that? The middle prefrontal cortex of the brain has in it 5, what in the words of positive intelligence are called sage powers. Sage, S-A-G-E, sage powers.
Okay, good.
And it speaks in the language of love and empathy and curiosity and creativity and peace, purpose, clarity, innovation, enthusiasm. Those sound like God qualities, don't they? Right? For me, when I layer my spiritual belief on top of this, like, oh my gosh, that's the side of the brain that connects me with the divine. I mean, we're all divine. We know we're all divine. But if we're just looking at our physiology,
right,
that's the part where God shows up,
right,
fully and completely.
Right.
So that's the 5 of our 10, 5, 3 of the factor analysis. That's at the root of how we're showing up in life. The 3, there are 3 mental muscles that we need to develop. Just like if you want to lift 100-pound weight, you can't walk into a gym and do that the first time.
Or the third,
right? Or the 10th time even, right? You got to start depending on where you are, with 5 pounds, 10 pounds, 20 pounds, and work your way up. 2 pounds, whatever it might be, right? Yeah. So we need to build these mental muscles.
And we have bought into a myth of male and female as being not only opposites, but mutually exclusive, like they are completely separate things. And it's not true. It's not true biologically. It's not true in terms of identity. And we do damage to ourselves when we do not understand this. We do damage to ourselves and to each other when we perpetuate the myth of exclusivity, because it's just not true. Besides being an activist in this for, like virtually my whole life, as was mentioned earlier, I actually have 2 lawsuits in the textbooks around gender identity and sexual orientation issues. But besides all of that, I think when it really hit me the most was when I started doing prison outreach work. Been doing prison outreach work for only over 20 years, going inside of prisons. And for whatever reason, it's always been male prisons. And this one male prison in particular that's been our mainstay, for decades now. And what I know is that if these men had been allowed to just express a lot of what we would call feminine characteristics, if they had been allowed to cry or to grieve, to love, to express some tenderness, a lot of them wouldn't be in prison today. They wouldn't be in prison today. But locked into a hypermasculinity. And it was in prison that they learned to chill out. It was in prison that they learned like how to care and how to have some empathy and some concern and how to grieve and how to cry. But it's to say we really do damage to each other when we don't allow ourselves to be the full expression of all that we're meant to be. Because physiologically speaking, hormonally speaking, we are both combinations. We are combinations of both male and female.
Yes. So thank you all so much for being here. Thank you, Robert and Bill, for this wonderful idea. What I know is that this is just a quick sample of all that happened all year long. So you could just look at this and go, okay, how do you vision? How do you just a really quick video to show you a number of wonderful ideas. So thank you very much for this and everyone who participated and joined today. Is there anything that we want to remind anybody of, or we're done? Anybody? You want to do more about the book?
If you'd like to write an entry, if you're a member of Anton, you'd like to write an entry for the Anton book, the information is on the website, and we would love to have that. I whipped off a second one. It's about transformation. It's about prayers working. I mean, you guys know how to do this. If you're not an Anton member, then you can become an Anton member. And if you are and you're not a lifetime member, then you're going to get a chance to renew your membership on Monday.
Beautiful.
First of the year. Michelle, anything I miss?
No, you got it. Thank you, Bill.
There's a link in the video in the chat to today's video. So if you want to go back and look at some other things and or share this video with other people, or look at it later on in the year, it's available on our YouTube link. So the link is in the chat right now if you want to grab that.
Yep, and all of the recordings of the new Thought Leader Thursday
right.
episodes are also in the YouTube channel.
Right. So thank you, thank you all for being here. Happy New Year! Thanks for taking some time out of your holiday to be here with us today. And some wonderful food. Thank you so much.
Happy holidays.
Thank you,
Happy
everyone.
holidays, everybody.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
that's all keto.
Yeah. Perfect.
Thank you, Steve.
Happy holidays, everyone from
Happy
Tennessee.
holidays,
We love
everyone.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Robert. Nicely done.
Thank you.
Very nicely done.
Did Bill turn off the YouTube?
That was a good one.